To the NFL, with the Maxx Crosby deal falling through, the Baltimore Ravens pivoted on Wednesday, agreeing to terms on a 4-year, $120 million free agent deal with pass rusher Trey Hendrickson instead. Hendrickson is a 4-time Pro Bowler who led the league in sacks in 2024, but played just 7 games last season in Cincinnati before season-ending injuries to his core and hip. NFL insider Dan Graziano joining us this morning now on SportsCenter to break it all down. Dan, how did we get to this point?
With the Ravens and Trey Hendrickson. I mean, look, they obviously agreed to the Maxx Crosby deal with the Raiders late last week. They gave him a physical. It all fell apart over the physical, and the Ravens quickly pivoted. They had been talking to Trey Hendrickson and, had kind of been talking about, could we add both? I don't think that was realistic, but once the Crosby deal fell apart, then they had the resources, and then also they lost Tyler Linderbaum to the same team. They had the resources to make a bigger offer to Trey Hendrickson, and it was enough to get him to sign. So Baltimore pivoting quickly and addressing its biggest need, and also ends up with their first-round picks in the next 2 drafts, which they had already agreed to trade for Maxx Crosby.
That's a great point. They dished out a lot of money, but they keep those crucial draft picks. Maxx Crosby, meanwhile, tweeting this out late last night: "Everything happens for a reason. Believe nothing you hear and half of what you see. I'm a Raider. I'm back. Run that stuff."
Right. Stuff.
The Raiders spent more than $280 million in free agency after thinking they had dealt Crosby and his $30 million a year contract, Dan. So what do they do now with all of those promises to free agents and Crosby back in the fold?
My understanding is it all still fits, that they had enough cap room that they can do all these deals they agreed to on Monday and Tuesday and still bring back Maxx Crosby on that contract. Is it ideal? Probably not. But they don't have to back out of any deals or make any other moves to accommodate this. Now, they're still hearing from teams on Maxx Crosby, and it's certainly still possible he could end up traded. But because of everything that's gone on the last couple of days, teams are trying to get him for pennies on the dollar, and the Raiders aren't interested in moving him unless they get a high-level return. Could they still get 2 first-round picks from somebody? Probably not, but if you let this go into the summer a little bit, as he gets healthier, you might be able to get more than what's on the table now. So I think that's part of the Raiders' plan, is also a chance he plays for them in 2026. So a lot of things are on the table right now, pretty much anything except him going to Baltimore.
We know one team is eliminated, but the future is still uncertain for Maxx Crosby. We will see. All right, Dan, let's pivot from pass rusher to passer. Kyler Murray is expected to meet with the Vikings today. What more can you tell us about the interests from both sides there?
The Vikings going into this offseason had targeted a couple of veterans that they believed would get cut and they could get on minimum salary deals as a result of all the money that their current teams were paying them. Kyler Murray and Geno Smith were the 2 guys at the top of the list, so in whatever order. Now, Geno ends up getting traded to the Jets a couple of days ago, which leaves everyone in the league to believe that that means Minnesota has settled on Kyler. So I think the widespread belief around the league is that this is a deal that will get done, that Kyler will play for the Vikings this year. If it doesn't, then maybe they pivot to Kirk Cousins or someone else. But right now it seems like there's mutual interest. Kyler Murray would go, as I said, on a minimum salary deal. Arizona's paying him $36.8 million this year no matter what. So anything he makes from the Vikings would be offset against that. Arizona would get it back. So he has no reason to do them any favors. And then, they'll see what happens. Maybe a light goes on with JJ McCarthy. Maybe Kyler becomes their answer. They leave their options open for after this season.
Potential QB competition there in Minnesota for Kevin O'Connell. I know Justin Jefferson just wants better quarterback play in general.
He just wants the ball, man.
That's right. More from Graz at the top of the hour on Get Up. Make sure you peep that. Thank you, Dan.
All right, I won't bother you.
Oh, these work. Cool.
What? The
juice.
Chargers?
Yeah.
Oh, these Chargers are unbelievable.
They're just decorations.
No. Like they're the magnetic Chargers.
No, obviously they work. So
yeah, very good. Very good.
I'm sure
phone
people
Chargers
are
we have
really,
in the studio.
people who are listening are really excited to be this part of the conversation.
Yeah, as always.
Sorry, everyone.
No, you're good. Quarterback, we were just talking about Daniel Jones, Kyler Murray. Let's have you join that conversation. Was there any thought by Indy?
No. No, they were locked in on their plan.
They never had a thought.
Daniel Jones was the guy for them. They felt like that's why you saw them tag him, and they didn't negotiate with anybody else. No, I mean, I think there was a non-zero chance that it was going to fall apart with Daniel Jones at some point, and I'm sure they had some contingency plans, but my understanding is this is what they wanted, and especially to be able to also keep Alec Pierce.
Kyler Murray to Minnesota. You said a non-zero chance that it would fall apart with Indy. What percentage are we at that Kyler Murray will be a Viking?
I think it starts with a 9. I'd be shocked, I think, at this point. He's going to visit today. I think, the Vikings, there were 2 guys at the top of Minnesota's list among these veterans that were getting cut, Geno Smith and Kyler Murray. Geno ends up getting traded and getting a little more money out of the deal. But I think, once that happened, it was a pretty clear signal that Minnesota had made up its mind who it wanted. So we'll see. I mean, things could turn south. We could be talking about Minnesota and Kirk Cousins here in a couple of days. But most people I talk to seem pretty sure that Kyler ends up there.
So what does the Kyler Murray Minnesota thing look like?
He was saying, David was asking, what does the Kyler Murray Minnesota thing look like in terms of both the success as well as the financials in terms of Minnesota and Kyler? Because you were on set and Dominic Foxworth said, hey, they could be legit contenders on Get Up the other day.
Well, I mean, they won 14 games 2 years ago with Sam Darnold playing quarterback, and nobody expected anything out of Sam Darnold going into that year. And in fact, you can make a pretty good case that Kyler Murray has been a better player to this point in his career than Sam Darnold had been at that point in his career. So, and then you look last year, they managed to get to 9 wins with sort of actively detrimental quarterback play. Like if you just get to middle of the road quarterback play, you feel like you can probably do better than 9, given everything else they have and the coaching and everything. So yeah, Kyler, if he's healthy and he takes to whatever Kevin O'Connell needs him to do, I think that makes Minnesota, puts them right back in that contender category.
We're talking with Dan Graziano, ESPN NFL reporter here on Sportsmanlike, presented by Progressive Insurance. Graz, which line from yesterday's Eric DeCosta, Ravens general manager press conference is more believable? That he was gutted by everything, or that the plan was to have Crosby and Hendrickson?
But you're not putting me in a great spot there.
Okay, let me ask it differently. Which one was more logical to actually take place?
I think the first one.
Okay,
I
so
think
you can believe that.
I believe that he is a particular fan of that player and was excited to have him on his team. I think that's true. My sense of it is that Eric DeCosta was very disappointed with what came back on the medicals, and wanted to have Crosby on the team. They were talking to Hendrickson. I don't know how realistic it was to have them both on the team. But certainly once they realized they weren't getting Crosby, it became a lot easier for them to throw those resources at Trey Hendrickson.
A lot of tentacles, obviously, from the way that this developed, Dan. But I want to go here. Maxx Crosby tweeted, I'm a Raider, I'm back. Is he staying there based on your understanding, or are they still fielding calls? Could he end up somewhere else?
They're getting calls, but they're not getting good offers. Like this is, there's blood in the water, right? So these teams say, oh, well, if there's a health concern, we don't have to offer what we might have had to offer last week. So the Raiders feel like right now, like he fits under their cap, he fits in their budget. They can hold on to him until such time as the value goes back up. Maybe later this summer, the MRI looks cleaner. Maybe he's able to get on the field and practice and show something. And then, you can get more for him. Or maybe you keep him. I mean, there's worse things than having Maxx Crosby on your team. So I would say this. At this point, I think there's a non-zero chance that he is a Raider in 2026. But I also do think that they'll continue to get calls. And if the price goes up, that they would revisit the idea of moving him.
Why have the Cowboys made so many moves to exit players?
Like
Osa Odighizuwa yesterday, Solomon Thomas. They've made moves, and obviously they've made a big move before the season last year. We know that.
They're changing their defense. They have a new coordinator and a new system. The front will be aligned differently. Since they signed Osa Odighizuwa to an extension this time last year, they have acquired Kenny Clark and Quinnen Williams in trades. So they're a little overloaded at that defensive tackle position. They felt like getting Odighizuwa's contract off their books was a good idea, considering they felt like the other two, Clark and Williams, are better fit in what they want to do. They get a third-round pick. Because of all these deals they made until yesterday, they did not have a day 2 pick in this year's draft. So now they do for a player that frankly was going to have a hard time, I think, getting on the field consistently. For Solomon Thomas was, he was the 3rd pick in the draft once upon a time, but at this point in his career, he's a guy that's a piece, and if he fits, right? Yeah. And so again, new defense, maybe different kind of personnel they're looking for.
We've seen some pieces move out of Philly. Nakobe Dean, Reed Blankenship, Jalen Phillips. We have 2 Eagles fans on our show who yesterday, when the Maxx Crosby deal was falling apart, said, Howie, get on this. Go get Maxx Crosby. Do you expect any moves coming out of the Eagles?
Yeah,
any additional moves?
Eagles.
Yes.
Yes, of course. We always expect them to make moves. I do think if Crosby, becomes a realistic trade target again, I think that's a team to watch for sure. That is a need they have. They they lost Jalen Phillips in free agency. They weren't going to go to $30 million a year for him. He played well for them, but still in their eyes, probably not that kind of player. So they'll continue to poke around. Jonathan Grenard, the Vikings edge rusher, who's available in trade. That's a guy to watch potentially if things move ahead there as the Eagles look around for edge rush help. But no, they'll always be active. I mean, the good teams understand that like the last 3 days aren't the entire offseason. And I think, the Eagles will continue to look for creative solutions as they always do.
Graz, both ends of the spectrum here. The team that either you believe or people in league circles have said to you, boy, they've done a good job. And then the team that people have said or you believe, boy, what are they doing here?
I think who's done a good job. I mean, people like it's not exciting, but like Tennessee has added a lot of guys that are useful in terms of their rebuild and helping Cam Ward develop quickly. I think the teams that have been less active, such as the Eagles, the Seahawks have lost a lot of people. I mean, that's just sort of cost of doing business. You're talking about the last 2 Super Bowl champs. Obviously, there's a lot of good players on those rosters, and you would expect that some of them get priced out. But the good teams continue to draft and backfill and all that. So, you look at free agency, I think, Baltimore, until they had Hendrickson yesterday, would have been a team that was facing a significant deficit in terms of players lost versus players acquired. They still need to rebuild the middle of their offensive line. Yeah, I think you would look at this point in the week, people are going to cite the teams that did the most as the winners and the teams that did the least as the losers. It doesn't usually work out that way, but that's how it feels at the moment.
Graz, final thing. Anything else that we should be keeping an eye on over the next 24 hours or so? Obviously, Kyler, you said, but is there anything else that you think is Kirk Cousins' market maybe?
Cousins, I think, wants to wait it out a little bit and see what the good situation ends up being. Like if Aaron Rodgers decided to retire and now Pittsburgh needed somebody, I think he becomes interesting for them. If things didn't work out with Kyler Murray in Minnesota, I think Kirk Cousins becomes interesting for them. So I think he wants to be patient from what I've been told and see where things sort of settle in the quarterback market. So it could take a while for that one. And then there's the potential for trades. I mentioned Jonathan Grenard, who's a potentially an impact pass rusher in Minnesota, who's available. A.J. Brown, it sounds like that's cooled off, but teams are still trying. So, I would look for maybe a big name trade or two here in the next week or so.
Awesome. Dan Graziano always does a phenomenal job with us. Read his stuff, ESPN.com, and you'll see him on Get Up at 8 a.m. Eastern Time. We're on Sportsmanlike, presented by Progressive Insurance.